This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Sudan military says talks with protest leaders to resume Sunday following 72-hour suspension. Malawi presidential candidates in last push ahead of elections on Tuesday. And Ethiopia begins rationing electricity for homes and industries following drop in water levels. Hello and welcome to CGTN. This is Africa Live and I'm Karen Roberts in Nairobi. Also coming up in the programme, Nigeria's Road Safety Commission to embark on measures to improve road safety. And in sports, Manchester City hammer Watford 6-0 in the FA Cup final to become the first English side to complete a domestic treble. Transition talks are set to resume today in Sudan between the Transitional Military Council and the Opposition Alliance. But as talks are set to start, Islamic groups are calling for the inclusion of Sharia law in the country's new constitution. Asta Tal has more on the country's developing political situation.
Sudanese Islamist movements have been rallying against a roadmap by protesters seeking civilian rule. The roadmap, they say, makes no mention of Islamic Sharia law in the country. As army rulers and the Alliance for Freedom and Change resume talks, negotiations have sidelined the Islamists. As the army rulers and the Alliance for Freedom and Change resume talks, negotiations have sidelined the Islamists.
We tell the military council to stand at an equal distance from all sides in Sudan. We do not want to exclude anyone, but we did not drop an Islamic dictator to replace him with a leftist dictator.
The protest movement has previously said the issue of Sharia was irrelevant at this stage and would be discussed later, as installing a civilian administration was their main demand. In the meantime, the UN has condemned reports of excessive use of force by Sudanese security forces against protesters. At least 4 people were killed last week. According to protesters, troops in military vehicles fired live ammunition as they tried to clear demonstrators from an avenue near Sudan's foreign ministry. Those killed include 1 soldier. Sudan's Rapid Support Forces has said those responsible will be arrested.
The perpetrators who killed protesters have been arrested and will be revealed to the media shortly or after a few hours, but will be presented today. They recorded a judicial confession and were taped doing so. If we are liars, the camera does not lie.
World powers such as the African Union and the UN have called on both sides to reach an agreement fast and to establish the formation of a truly civilian-led interim government. Asta Tal, CGTN.
To Côte d'Ivoire now, where Biumi residents have been speaking out following inter-ethnic clashes that erupted on Wednesday. The violence has so far claimed 7 lives, leaving 44 others injured. That's according to police. Fighting broke out after an altercation between a taxi driver and a motorbike operator. The West African nation has witnessed a surge in intercommunal violence in the recent past.
The first day after the reprisals between motor taxi and drivers, the situation became widespread. So it was a run for your life situation. They came to burn down our mosque, so we needed self-defense, and we left as reinforcement. If there's oil on fire today, it's because they're the ones who started to get the real ones out to shoot us.
I mean it well. They said we killed one of their own. That is what they said. Otherwise, it's not Bole Diola. Now people have transformed this story that it is Bole Diola. That's how it is started. So they came across masses, drivers, they started hitting them. So people had to defend themselves. People were able to control it, to calm down. The next day, they went out with the guns. We were here in the neighborhoods and heard people shooting.
les gens commencent à tirer.
They came to attack the village. They were armed with 12-gauge guns. I tried to save my old ladies. I couldn't because they shot me. So when they fired, I started running. When I came back, my 2 old ladies couldn't get out of the house. They set fire to the house.
Boeing has acknowledged it had to correct flaws in its simulator software that mimics the flying experience of the 737 MAX jets. It's been revealed that the simulator was unable to adequately replicate certain flight conditions, including those that led to the fatal Ethiopian Airlines crash on March the 10th, killing 157 people. The airplane manufacturer did not disclose when it first became aware of the problem or whether it informed regulators. Boeing's MCAS anti-stalling software has been implicated in 2 crashes over 6 months. The company says that it's completed a software update for the MAX 737s and is working with the US aviation authorities to get the plane back in the air. Well, now let's speak to CGTN Giram Chala, who is on the line from Addis Ababa for us. This disclosure is the latest blow to the reputation of the aircraft manufacturer after 2 fatal crashes. What's been the reaction there?
Well, Ethiopian Airlines, first of all, since the crash has been following up every development from the manufacturer of the aircraft 737 MAX, which is Boeing. And Ethiopian Airlines also last week said that whatever developments are coming when it comes to fixing the software problem or the simulator corrections that are being released from Boeing will be reconfirmed and will be also seen in-house for compatibility issues. Now, let's come to the most important point. As Ethiopian Airlines and other airliners have grounded the 737 MAX 8 planes and are costing them every day, the most important thing for all of them, including Ethiopian Airlines, is to avoid further damage, any possibilities of a crash. It's a good news for Ethiopian Airlines people that Boeing has finished working on the new format for the simulator to be compatible. But remember, Boeing itself did not even let any operator understand that the nosedive issue could be or could not be seen or can be experienced in the simulators that they have distributed for them. So that is very unfortunate. It's indeed a blow for Boeing again. And ET, what they want right now, according to the officials themselves, is that they want to pick the planes up from the grounding, and then they want to operate with them. But they still want to understand if this new development is going to be really a solution that can fix any problem that has been seen so far. So ET is cautiously following up the development. They are saying that soon they will confirm if this is going to work for them, but they're still working with the manufacturer, Boeing.
Okay, thank you, Giram, for that update. That was CGTN's Giram Chala there on the latest development with Boeing. Well, aviation experts meeting in Kampala have warned that Africa's aviation systems are a potential target for terrorist cyber attacks. The concern was raised at the Africa Aviation Week summit in Uganda, from where Isabel Nakiria now reports.
Aviation safety and security representatives from Africa say there is a possible threat from terrorists to hack into aviation systems. Participants from over 20 African countries say the industry needs to pay more attention to airport security systems.
You don't want a situation where somebody can hack into an air navigation system and make an aeroplane be navigated to a place that they're not supposed to go. There are some people who can make an attempt even to have an aircraft crash through air navigation system.
Airports in Africa have in the recent past faced threats from terrorists. In 2014, the US warned of a specific threat of an attack on Entebbe International Airport by the terrorist group Al-Shabaab, but it didn't happen. North African countries have also battled militant Islamic groups targeting air passengers. In 2015, the Islamic State blew up a plane leaving the Egyptian beach resort of Sharm el-Sheikh, killing 224 people.
Aviation is international, so once they take down one aircraft,
you'll find that it's different, a lot of nationalities that will have suffered as a result. And it can easily move from one country to another. So we have to make sure that our systems are tight and make it difficult for them to be able to resort to it.
Experts say better screening of both passengers and airport staff is required. The meeting notes that insiders like airport workers could be used as recruits by extremists.
You know, it is possible for people who work in airports, whether they are flight crew or whether they are ground crew or others who have access to security-sensitive installations, there is a threat from insiders that we have recognized.
Though many airports in Africa have taken steps to increase security screening, groups here insist more is needed. To ensure safety of air travel, the meeting has recommended additional steps. They have prioritized the consistent training of airport security personnel in intelligence detection and heightening surveillance systems. It's expected that airports in Africa will take up these measures to avert any attacks. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Kampala.
Let's now head to Malawi, where the country is preparing for presidential and general elections. They're set to take place on May the 21st, with a tough battle set for the presidential poll. Incumbent President Peter Mutharika is facing a stiff challenge from a number of candidates, including former Vice President Solus Chilima, who quit the ruling Democratic Progressive Party to form the United Transformation Movement. President Mutharika is hoping the development of infrastructure projects during his administration will woo voters. Malawi faces a myriad socio-economic problems. More than half the population lives in poverty, with the young in particular suffering from high unemployment. While young voters and voters in rural areas are set to be the deciding factor in the upcoming polls. CGTN's Wilkista Nyabwa is keeping tabs on the elections in Malawi for us, and she now joins us on the line from Blantyre. Wilkista, 48 hours to go. Can you give us an update on the election preparation and the general atmosphere in Malawi at the moment?
Thank you very much. Well, I would say right now Malawi is very calm, partly because it's a Sunday and everyone has taken a break, but also because most of the presidential candidates held their major rallies yesterday ahead of the deadline today, just marking the end of the campaign period. And therefore, the incumbent President Peter Mutharika was here in Blantyre, and he did hold a rally here, speaking to his supporters, making a last-minute effort to just appeal to everyone who has not seen. He has been on the road for about a month, and this is the same as the other candidates who are also in different parts. Two of the opposition candidates were around the capital in Lilongwe, while the rest just basically crisscrossed the country on ahead of the election. However, today we do know that the Malawi Electoral Commission is also busy distributing electoral materials to different parts of the country. They started yesterday, and they could see vehicles going around, and today as well, just trying to ensure that everything...
I'm sorry, we will have to leave it there. We could not hear Wilkista very well. Apologies for the sound quality. We are going now to a short break. Don't go away, lots more to come, including... Fury in Tunisia as ex-President Ben Ali hints at making a political comeback. And the UN reiterates calls for investigations into human rights abuses inflicted on local residents in South Sudan.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Capital economic data out of the country. The country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Penina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
I'm while reporting from Nairobi City Center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. Africa Live. Find your voice.
In Tunisia, former President Zine El Abidine Ben Ali could be making a political comeback. In a letter sent to the public through his lawyer, Ali says that he's in good health and promised to be back. Ben Ali is still facing accusations of killing peaceful protesters in 2011. As Adnan Shawashi now reports, the letter has been received with anger by many Tunisians.
Munir bin Salha, the lawyer of former Tunisian ruler Ben Ali, has published a letter he claims the ousted president has addressed to the Tunisian people. It is the first message of Ben Ali since the 2011 popular uprising, when he was forced to leave power and seek exile in Saudi Arabia.
Former Tunisian President Ben Ali has dismissed rumors about his deteriorating health and confirmed that he enjoys ultimate health and safety in Saudi Arabia. Rumors have upset him and his family. He's following the situation in Tunisia and promising to return home.
Taraq is one of the victims of the 2011 popular uprising against Ben Ali. Now he still remembers the face of the policeman who opened fire during a peaceful march in the city of Zaghwan. The officer was neither arrested nor tried after the fall of the Ben Ali regime.
I was shot on January 12, 2011. I took to the streets to protest peacefully. Now I'm handicapped. The revolution will continue. We ousted Ben Ali. We will not tolerate his return.
Many victims of the Ben Ali regime have gathered near the government's palace in Tunis. They are staging a sit-in to denounce the atrocities committed during 23 years of reign of the ousted ruler. Some people who are still nostalgic of the Ben Ali era have welcomed his message, but the majority believes he should be held to account for his crimes. Most of the people here had spent at least a decade in prison. They were condemned for their opposition to Ben Ali. These men, as well as women, were not allowed to work before 2011. Now they claim that injustice has continued after the January 14 revolution.
We believe in transitional justice. The state cannot turn the page on over 2 decades of suffering and injustice. The former dictator must be tried for his heinous crimes. These people said no to Ben Ali and paid a heavy price.
During the 2011 unrest, over 3,000 young men were wounded and at least 300 people killed when security forces opened fire to stop the wave of protest against the Ben Ali regime. Rights activists accused the ousted ruler of ordering the shooting of peaceful protesters, while Ben Ali's lawyers believe he has the right to a fair trial. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
After the ANC retained power after 57.5% of the vote last week, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa now faces the daunting task of forming the cabinet to oversee his promised transformation of the economy. Top on the agenda is reforming Eskom, that's the country's electricity utility firm. CGTN's Yulissa and Jamela has more.
President Cyril Ramaphosa's governing African National Congress has been given another chance to prove itself willing to diligently serve the people of South Africa.
With the elections now firmly behind us and President Ramaphosa having secured the election as the president, investor focus now shifts to his ability to fix the country's major problems.
The country is already moving rapidly towards the first sitting of parliament and the appointment of new ministers and deputies to implement standing policies. The list of expectations from the South African population remains quite lengthy.
The biggest challenge is the unemployment of a lot of young people who are graduating from universities. So urgently, he has to hit the road running in terms of employment creation and making sure that these young people who are coming out of universities and colleges get jobs.
One of the other essential first steps the president has to take is to revive a waning economy.
Transforming an economy once it falls down is a very difficult process, and it's normally a medium to long-term process. If he has capital on his side, if capital buys into his economic agenda, then it means he has extra resources other than the resources he has within government to drive the economy.
Cash-strapped state-owned power utility Eskom poses one of the biggest threats to economic growth as it struggles to meet electricity demand. Eskom is the South African electricity public utility. But there's also the question of land reform. South Africa's lawmakers agreed to amend the constitution to allow for expropriation of land without compensation. This is to address the past injustices. Investors have been jittery about this. The president has on many occasions had to reassure them.
We've got to have land reform. We've got to address the original sin. But I am clear on one thing. We've got to do it in terms of the rule of law. We are not a banana republic. We are a Nelson Mandela's republic. And we will do it in accordance with the ethos that Nelson Mandela lived by and stood for.
After his inauguration on the 25th of May, President Ramaphosa is expected to announce a substantially trimmed-down cabinet as part of cost-cutting measures. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Ethiopia has started to ration electricity for domestic and industrial customers. This comes after a drop in water levels in hydroelectric dams led to a production deficit. Ethiopia has also suspended electricity exports to neighbouring countries Djibouti and Sudan. CGTN's Giram Chala has more.
Including here in the capital, Addis Ababa, all cities, towns and villages across Ethiopia are affected by the power shortage seen since a couple of weeks back. And due to the drop in water levels of Ethiopia's dams, especially to that of Gibe 3, close to 500 megawatts of power deficit has been seen. It is big industrial plants and factories which are most affected because of this power rationing here in the country. They are now obliged to follow strict production schedules which should coincide with the ongoing hours of power cut. Ethiopia's Minister of Water and Electricity said the drop in water levels has led Ethiopia to lose a third of the country's electricity generation of 1,400 megawatts, and said if the soon-to-come rainy season can help to quickly increase the water levels of the dams, the rationing will be lifted immediately. Unfortunately, Ethiopia has also halted electricity exports to neighboring Djibouti and Sudan until power production returns to normalcy. The halt in power supply to Sudan and Djibouti will affect the $180 million the country gets from power sales yearly. Grumjara CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
In South Sudan, the state of Equatoria has been experiencing sporadic violence. This is despite the peace deal that saw the end of conflict in the rest of the country. However, patrols by peacekeepers under the UN mission in South Sudan are now seeing calm return to most villages. Here's more.
Until recently, Lobonok County in South Sudan's Equatorial State has been a battlefield. Opposing armed groups have been battling for political superiority, leaving many residents dead. Others have been displaced, while more are still counting personal losses.
I am suffering as a woman.
All of us are not happy because one of our grandmothers was raped by 2 young men. This makes me cry because our grandmothers are suffering. We have also lost some relatives.
They have destroyed the whole village. Now the whole place is empty. The few people remaining are here because of me, otherwise they would have fled.
But calm is now returning. This is attributed to security patrols by UN peacekeepers whose efforts have seen many locals have a sense of security and the confidence to engage in their day-to-day activities. Humanitarian agencies and human rights groups are also back, and this has excited residents.
Overall, even humanitarians are coming back. So there's some rebuild of confidence among the civilians to their local population. And so life is removing, there's more life, as we can say now. We can see people moving around freely, women on the street and children, and the shops are opening, which are good signs for Lobonok compared to the situation in February, where most people were displaced due to some disturbing situation in the area.
With the regular presence of UNMISS, things have changed. The army that used to be here has since pulled out, and we are now safe. People are planning to cultivate now that the rains are coming.
These security patrols are part of efforts of ensuring there's lasting peace in this region. Chao Muhono, CGTN.
Senegal recently held the 18th International Chinese Bridge Competition. The contest showcases students' ability in Chinese proficiency and strengthens the world's understanding of the language and culture. It covers a speech contest, art performances including poetry, songs and paintings. 11 students from different universities took part. The winner will represent Senegal in the final stages of the competition in July in China. The competition was organised by the Confucius Institute of Dakar in partnership with the Cheikh Anta Diop University of Dakar.
This year's competition is under the theme One World, One Family. The family has a special meaning for all of us. The Chinese and Senegalese people are all very attached to the family. One world, one family also corresponds to the principles on which Chinese diplomacy has always insisted.
Yes, I'm ready. I have been preparing myself for months. Now I will carry the flag of Senegal high. I will proudly represent Senegal in China and bring back the trophy for the first time here.
To some international news now. Switzerland is holding a referendum today on whether to bring its gun control laws in line with the European Union. Despite being a wealthy country in the heart of Europe, the small Alpine nation is not an EU member, but is part of the Schengen Open Border Treaty on the mainland. After the 2015 Paris attacks, which killed 130 people, the EU issued its Schengen members with new restrictions on gun control. The proposal has prompted a rare national debate over firearm ownership, with many Swiss saying that they're proud of the tradition. However, the government is worried a no vote could jeopardize its relations with the bloc. The head of Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps says his country is not pursuing war, but the enemies don't have the will for it either. This follows reports that a US strike group is now operating in the highly sensitive Persian Gulf region. Washington says the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln and B-52 bombers are being deployed to counter an alleged threat from Iran. On Saturday, US diplomats warned that commercial airliners flying over the wider Persian Gulf face a risk of being what they called misidentified. recap of our top stories now. Transition talks are set to resume today in Sudan between the Transitional Military Council and the Opposition Alliance. But as talks resume, Islamic groups are calling for the inclusion of Sharia law in the country's new constitution. So far, negotiations have sidelined the Islamists. In the past, the protest movement said the issue of Sharia was irrelevant at this stage and would be discussed later, as installing a civilian administration was their main demand. In Côte d'Ivoire, Biumi residents have been speaking out following inter-ethnic clashes that erupted on Wednesday. The violence has so far claimed 7 lives, leaving 44 others injured. That's according to police. Fighting broke out after an altercation between a taxi driver and a motorbike operator. The West African nation has witnessed a surge in inter-communal violence in the recent past. Malawi heads to the polls on Tuesday with a tough battle set for the presidential elections. Incumbent President Peter Mutharika is facing a stiff challenge from a number of candidates, including former Vice President Solus Chilima, who quit the ruling Democratic Progressive Party to form the United Transformation Movement. President Mutharika is hoping that the development of infrastructure projects during his administration will woo voters. Boeing has acknowledged that it had to correct flaws in its simulator software that mimics the flying experience of its 737 MAX jets. It revealed that the simulator was unable to adequately replicate certain flight conditions, including those that led to the fatal Ethiopian Airlines crash on March the 10th, killing 157 people. The airplane manufacturer did not disclose when it first became aware of the problem or whether it informed regulators. Boeing's MCAS anti-stalling software has been implicated in 2 crashes over 6 months. Well, those are the top stories that we're covering for you. We are going to a short break now. We've got all the business news coming up, including Nigeria's Road Safety Commission is to embark on massive crackdown on motorists without a valid driver's license. And China's top diplomat calls for US restraint on trade.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Nigeria's Road Safety Commission says it will begin a massive crackdown on motorists without a valid driver's license in the country's commercial city, Lagos. Quite a number of drivers lack a valid license, while over 60,000 driving licenses lay uncollected at the Commission's office. The Commission has now decided to go after offending drivers in what it calls Operation Show Your Driver's License. Here's CGTN's Deji Badmus with more on that story.
Sitting inside these locked shelves are thousands of uncollected driving licenses at the Road Safety Commission's office in Lagos. They've been processed and ready for collection for months now, but the owners have simply not come forward to collect them. It's a situation that's been giving the head of the Road Safety Commission in the city a serious cause for concern.
What has been going on is that people will apply for license. They will be issued a temporary slip. The man goes with the temporary slip and never cares to come back or go back to the licensing office to go and collect a permanent driver's license. So people drive with expired permanent temporary license. Some drive without license at all.
Thousands of motorists hit Lagos roads every day, but many are without valid driving licenses or carried expired ones. The Road Safety Commission has now decided enough is enough. It's now set to begin a crackdown on offending drivers.
If we actually discover that you don't have a valid driver's license, that vehicle will be impounded. And after 24 hours and you could not produce it, let's assume that we're giving you the benefit of the doubt of go home and go and pick it. You'll be issued citation. And under that, we have two options. We could even prosecute you, and we could also tell you, okay, you may wish to waiver your right to go to court and pay the prescribed fine of 10,000 naira.
The exercise is expected to last for 2 weeks and would see road safety officials deployed across Lagos. But for a city that is well known for its nightmare traffic, some fear the crackdown may worsen the traffic situation.
What we are doing is in the interest of the public. You cannot afford to have somebody carrying 18 passengers and he does not have a valid driver's license. So we cannot really put anything, there is nothing you can really use to compare human life. But it will also be done in such a way that we are not going to create any gridlock.
With the announcement of the impending Operation Show Your Driver's License, the number of collections at the Road Safety Office is gradually picking up. But you can expect a mad rush at the various licensing offices across the city when the crackdown eventually begins. It's called the last-minute syndrome here, and many have caught it. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
The South African government is facing a legal challenge over its decision to double the amount of sulfur dioxide that coal-fired power plants and refineries are allowed to emit. Groundwork, an environmental NGO, launched the challenge, saying the government broke the law by not first publishing the amendments to the air pollution legislation to the public. CGTN's Angelo Coppola explains.
The leagued power utility Eskom and listed coal-to-fuel company Sasol are the main beneficiaries of this new limit. But the CER says it's challenging the current Environmental Affairs Minister, Nomvulo Mokonyane, and President Cyril Ramaphosa in the Pretoria High Court, saying the government broke the law by not publishing the amendments for comment before changing the legislation.
What we want is for the Minister to follow the proper required process set out in the Air Quality Act, which means that when an amendment to a law is published for comment, it has to contain sufficient information to enable members of the public to make meaningful representations or objections. In this case, that proposed change wasn't submitted for comment at all.
The increased sulfur dioxide amounts will kick in April 2020 if the government gets its way. The CER claims that Eskom and Sasol have been actively involved in setting those emission standards and agreed to those initial limits.
Effectively, industry says that the costs of compliance are not worth the benefit. This in circumstances where air pollution is the world's largest environmental health risk, and Eskom is well aware that its stations have deadly impacts on humans.
The health impacts of pollution, and specifically sulfur dioxide pollution, have been widely reported, which makes the government decision to double those limits mystifying, says the NGO.
Millions of people in South Africa suffer from the consequences of poor air pollution, including sulfur dioxide, which has harmful impacts on respiratory function. It aggravates asthma, chronic bronchitis. Hospital admissions increase on days with high SO2 emissions. Also has impacts for infants.
While Eskom and Sasol and the other refineries wait to see whether the government will actually challenge this appeal, the pollution levels around the refineries and the power stations continues to affect the populations living near them. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has called out the US for policies that he says harm China's interests and companies. He made the comment in a phone call with US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Wang urged Washington to show restraint and not to go too far in the trade tensions. Wang said China is still willing to hold more talks, but on an equal footing. The two sides also talked about other international issues. On Iran, Wang said China calls on all involved parties to act with caution and to avoid escalating tensions. The Wall Street Journal is reporting that Washington's crackdown on China's Huawei could impact Silicon Valley companies. In a Friday story headlined "Pressure on Huawei Stings Suppliers," the paper pointed out that Huawei does business with Silicon Valley's biggest firms like Qualcomm and Broadcom for smartphone chips and Intel for cellular tower components. 2018 financial reports show a relatively high portion of US companies' revenues come from China. Qualcomm's share of revenue from China is 67%, while Intel and Nvidia draw roughly a quarter of their earnings from the country. Huawei's spokesperson Joe Kelly says the firm spent $70 billion on components and other supplies last year, with $11 billion going to US companies. Well, the former president of Colombia, Ernesto Samper Pizarro, is expressing support for China while criticizing the US for hindering free trade.
It's the U.S. who invited other countries to join the free trade system. That means entities can sell or purchase products anywhere they desire. But now, the U.S. is closing its door. It's selfish. I think imposing tariffs is not a good idea. Countries should compete freely. We invited China to join the WTO. China has been performing well since. Now it's the U.S. who is violating WTO rules. The U.S. is damaging world harmony.
We are going to a short break in a moment, including what's cooking in Tunisia. We find out in a bit as the country's best chefs come together for a national culinary contest.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes. The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
During the fasting month of Ramadan, Tunisia's best chefs judge young cooks during a national cooking contest. Participants are evaluated on their organisation, attachment to local customs, as well as food, originality and taste, of course. The event attracts thousands of Tunisians and foreign visitors who are passionate about cooking. CGTN's Adnan Chouachi has more.
Tunisia has hosted the prestigious Top Chef contest. The national cooking competition has attracted the best chefs and cooks in the North African state.
We encourage creativity and originality in cuisines, but first, young cooks must know and master Tunisia's culinary heritage.
Renowned chefs believe that using local natural products from Tunisian terroir improves the taste of recipes.
I'm a specialist in Tunisian terroir. During my cooking career, I visited many towns and cities in Tunisia and learned traditional cooking techniques and centenary recipes from grandmothers. I'm sharing this cooking know-how during Ramadan.
Young participants used sorghum, which is also known as great millet or dra in Tunisia, to make delicious low-fat cakes.
Sorghum has always been part of Tunisia's culinary culture. I've presented this natural product in a modern way. Taking part in this national contest is a chance. I'm encouraging young people to eat healthy food.
Winners of the prestigious Tunisian food contest will have the chance to cook in the cuisines of the best restaurants in the North African country. During the Muslim fasting month of Ramadan, restaurants open their doors in the evening. Dozens of cooking TV programs are produced and many contests are organized. People here welcome a 4-week period of fasting and feasting. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
To Senegal now, where a local artist there is reinventing how traditional calabash goods are used. Abdoulaye Mbaye has been transforming dried calabash into hand-carved lampshades. CGTN's Daniel Arapmoy has the story.
At his workshop in Benin Tali, a working-class neighborhood of Dakar, Abdoulaye Mbaye creates his unique pieces. The Senegalese artist fashions lampshades from engraved calabashes, wood, beads and recycled materials.
I came from an artistic family. Most of my brothers are artists. I used to go to exhibitions which awoke the artist inside of me. In 2012, I went to see the Dakar Biennale at City Hall. There, I told my brother, in 2014, I will be the one showing at the Biennale. Indeed, in 2014, I exhibited my work there for the first time. Today, I'm at my 3rd Biennale.
Creating one of Mbaye's lamp shades requires a series of consecutive steps. He finishes each piece by inserting the lighting element into the gourd and then attaching it to a custom lamp base. It takes a week to make 2 lamps, and each sells for $100 to $200.
I select calabashes according to their shape. Then I cut and soak them for hours, for I can print my inspiration on the sides. I make models according to the shape. For example, on this oval calabash, I decided to make vertical lines. With round calabashes, I prefer to make engravings. With this one, I decided to incorporate bamboo stems. I added a small mechanism and sometimes I add paint. It depends on my inspiration.
Since he was very young, we already knew he was going to become an artist. What impresses me about him, he is persevering. A person extremely thirsty for perfection. I am constantly following what he does. One day, his fame will spread. He will become a great artist. The calabashes that he transforms are beautiful. When we see them, we feel his artistic talent.
In addition to lamps, Abdoulaye Mbaye paints using a technique that combines paint and beads. His central themes include nature, the environment, freedom and threats to the planet. The artist hopes to one day have his own gallery. Daniel Arapmoy, CGTN.
All the sports news coming up for you after the break, including Manchester City hammer Watford 6-0 in the FA Cup final to become the first English side to complete a domestic treble.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born. We're there for every goal, for every knockout, for every step of the way. Match Point, only on CGTN.